Good morning. I'm Robin Trostel, and I'm the coordinator here at Carnes Senior Center. And I'm here today with Don Goodpaster, author, poet, and songwriter. And he is going to be sharing some of his stories today. Mr. Goodpaster, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, thank you, Miss Robin. I certainly would. I'm excited to be here. I didn't come here today to tell you about my children's stories, my 33 children's stories. That's me. You don't want to see me 33 times, so I'll put these down. And I didn't come here to tell you about my poetry, my 38 poems that I have in this book that have been sold in a lot of Hallmark stores and Christian bookstores. I didn't come here to tell you about my children's stories on CDs and songs that I've worked on over the years. And lastly, I didn't come to tell you about my screenplays I've been writing. I have 4 of these. But I did come here for him. This is me 66 years ago. And he's going to tell you the story about his life starting in 1954. Now, if you'll allow me to sit down here, I would like to begin and tell you the story called Miracles, Marvels, Memories in Me by Donald K. Goodpaster. Miracles, Marvels, Memories in Me by Donald K. Goodpaster. I believe there are times in our lives when strange, unusual, and oftentimes unexplainable events transpire, occurrences and or situational events that we as mere normal human beings cannot begin to comprehend. That being said, I would like to take this opportunity to invite you now on an extraordinary journey, a journey in which my greatest hope and desire is to share with you a few of such examples of my life. Warning, please be aware and constantly on your guard at all times during this personal narrative of a smattering of my own unique brand of unadulterated comic levity, which may or may not rear its head every now and then throughout. Relax now if you would, and harvest for yourself a minute rough glimpse of my heart, soul, and life, for you are cordially invited to sojourn along back with me to my long ago past, to witness, albeit through my eyes, in his eyes, how the Lord God has always been there for me ever, even if I didn't know he was. Thank God I've finally grown up some. Chapter 1, the BlackBerry Patch. To begin with, I was going to start with in the beginning, but that was already taken. I'll start again. To begin with, I'm not from some sexy, romantic sounding far-off exotic place. Nothing like Marrakesh, Bangladesh, or Tel Aviv even. I'm from Indiana, and rural southeastern Indiana at that. And the first really good switching I remember getting happened when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and here's why. 2 doors down from where my folks and I lived Sandy. Sandy the Biter, I'll call her here. One day the Biter, that's a cool name, huh? She sunk her teeth into me real hard and bit me real hard on the forearm. And when she did, I slapped her really hard in the face, making her cry. Zelma, the handsome young dark-haired lady who lived next door to Sandy, but on the other side, she saw me do it, but she obviously didn't see her bite me first. Zelma, who had 2 small children younger and smaller than the Biter and me both, came clawing and scratching her way out of front of her door of her house, gesticulating wildly with her arms for me to beat it and go on home. Then she picked up a rock from the rutted gravel driveway and chucked it at me. Me, not wanting to look like a cringing coward here, picked up a rock too and chucked it right back at her. Then a second and then a third. We were at it, as they say, me and good-looking Zelma were, hotter than a pot-belly stove. But thankfully neither one of us could hit the broadside of a barn if it was right in front of us, so neither one of us was getting hurt. We were chucking right along like this for a while, until I was suddenly blindsided, whiplashed, right up off the ground by my mother, who had very much commando style like snuck up behind me and was now holding me up by one arm and wailing the living daylights out of my bottom with a weeping willow branch. And wouldn't you know it, just like Zelma didn't see Sandy bite me first, Mom didn't see Zelma throw the first stone either. What justice is there in the world anyway, I ask you? Mom, bless her lovely dear departed soul, was really good at whipping, I'm telling you. But she was more than just good at cooking, she was. She could work heavenly tasting miracles with a gallon of freshly picked raspberries or blackberries and a little store-bought sifted flour and an extra large dollop of Crisco lard. Almost nightly she would whip up for us a tasty mouth-watering treat of some kind we'd all enjoy with the evening meal. More often than not, those meals consisted of cornbread and navy beans, or cornbread and wild rabbit shot by my dad a day or two earlier, or cornbread and collard greens and onions, or cornbread and, well, I guess you get the picture I'm trying to paint for you here. Our family sure had a lot of cornbread. One day, and it was one especially hot day I remember, Mom called me in from a very important super wiffle ball game. I was playing with my friends out in our side yard. Our yard, and you can ask anybody who lived up our cozy little valley, was the best wiffle yard up the entire creek it was. Anyway, Mom called me inside, like I said, and the game of the century, as they all were back then to me, was instantly postponed for a later time and date. "Donnie Keith," she straightaway instructed as I stepped foot in the kitchen. "Go up the hill there, boy. Go up that hill and fetch me a gallon of berries for a cobbler," she said. Now, Mom, she always and forever instructed. She never ordered. But believe you me, I know an order when I hear one, especially when a sentence begins with my first name and is immediately followed by my middle one. Donnie Keith, do this, or Donnie Keith, do that. Whenever I heard that unmistakable tone in her voice, I would know right then and there, deep down in my heart, that it was time for me to stop dawdling around and move it quickly, which I almost never failed to do. "And watch out for Mr. Hall's bull," she tenderly added with motherly care. Trust me on this one, won't you, folks? Mom needn't have thrown that warning in. I was scared stiff of that crazy wild animal and totally avoided any pasture or open field I thought he might be lurking in. What was really scaring me, though, was not knowing where he was at any particular moment in time and having to speculate. So out I went, out to our little tack room in the garage behind the house, like I was told to, and grabbed up from there one of the white metal buckets that we kids used for berry picking. That would be my sisters Elaine and Diana Kay. Then I headed up the narrow, shallow, rocky creek that ran in front of our house to a place I knew had a large patch of blackberries just waiting for the picking. Big, juicy, plump ones. Almost there, I stooped my body down low and crawled on my belly under the four-stranded barbed wire fence that ran along the edge of the creek in Mr. Hall's old red barn, which was a shortcut I knew of. This would lead me to one of my favorite swimming holes, where I'd pamper myself with a quick, cool dip before I got down to the serious business of picking. I still remember that day really well, I do. I'd gone about 50 yards or so into that field that day when Mr. Hall's coal-black demon bull, a young bullish boy named Charlie, came charging around the corner of the barn on the uppermost level by the sliding doors. When Charlie spotted me standing there in the field below him, he skidded to a full stop in his tracks, and then, just as suddenly, snorted through his nose, ducked his head down low, and bolted forward like a bullet shot from a rifle, straight down the earthen ramp, heading right at me. At first, my feet froze to the ground, froze solid. Then I felt the earth begin to quake beneath my black canvas tennis shoes, as this now wannabe killer thundered like a freight train straight toward me, honing in on his prey, which in this case was me. Now, I've never been accused of being a quick thinker. You can pretty much ask anybody who lived up our valley about that. But even I thought pretty fast then when I thought, boy, you're about to die. And I was only 7 years old. Quickly like a cat, I spun around and ran as fast as I could for the fence line, which seemed, to my little boy brain anyway, to be miles away. The best I could, even if I do say so myself, I artfully dodged the long rod-like shafts of gristly, thorny bulrushes that were scattered here and there and everywhere through the field by nature's divine providence. I was running fast, I was. But the natural springs in and around the field, though, formed shallow, mushy, wet bogs here and there, slowing me down quite a bit. Charlie, the bull, I'm sorry to say, was closing in fast, shortening the distance between the two of us with each and every stride. I knew this because I could easily hear the tall green horseweeds being crushed down by his broad, muscular chest as he rushed in for the kill. Out from his nose, I imagined great gobs of translucent snot being thrown all over the place, some to the point of almost reaching my nakedly exposed back. I may have only just imagined that in my mind, though, for I certainly wasn't about to turn around and look, now was I? No, I wasn't. This was going to be a terribly close race between the two of us running here to the fence line, and it didn't appear that I was going to win. And I wouldn't have either, I know, unless I did something Charlie wouldn't expect me to do. He had me nailed dead in his sights, this treacherous young demon did. You know and are well aware, of course, I'm sure, of the proverbial bullseye you always hear people talking about. Well, it was on me this time, directly in the middle of my back. I don't know what made me think to do it when I did, but I smashed my right foot down hard, jamming it into this soggy grass and loamy Indiana soil there beneath my feet, and cut straight away to my left, almost at a perfect 90-degree right angle. This quickly thought out, decisive move forced Charlie, if he wanted to get me, which he did, to shift his weight at almost the exact same time, and when he did, his legs slipped out from under him, and all at once he fell over in a thrashing tangle of legs on his side, and from there he slid all the way over onto his back, sliding along in that awkward-looking position for quite a few more feet. I couldn't tell you how many, though, because I wasn't about to go back and step it off. To this day, I believe that my dodging away like that and at that exact moment was what saved my life. While Charlie was down and still sliding along like that, I continued to make my exit, running dead straight for the fence line now, not even attempting anymore to zigzag my way around the prickly bulrushes, but going straight over and through them. With one swift, frantic backwards glance over my shoulder, I took a chance and saw him scurrying back up to his feet as fast as he could go. And believe it or not, he appeared to be even angrier at me now than he was before when this whole thing started. Head down and more determined than ever, it seemed, Charlie was quickly reducing the distance between the two of us with every stride. Boy, was he ever resolute and doggedly determined to win this life and death battle between us. But you know what? So was I. Because I wanted to live, and I don't quit. Finally, a small measure of self-reliance arose in me as I arrived there at the fence line, where, to my absolute delight, I saw waiting for me there an 8-foot-long 2x4 plank of old red painted barnwood that someone, and that someone was probably Mr. Hall, the owner of the farm, had recently placed there to hold up a broken section of fence. Quickly, I ran up the plank and jumped over the barrier, landing on my side in an extremely large prickly patch of ready-to-pick blackberries I didn't even know was there. I squashed down my picking bucket that day when I landed on it in the bushes because it was belted to my waist and I couldn't just stop and drop it off during the chase, now could I? But who cared? Not me. I could always get a new bucket, but I can't always get a new life, now can I? I win. Charlie loses, I live on. Postscript. Even with the bull falling down the way he did that day, he still almost got me. He was that quick. What was interesting, though, if only to me, and a miracle you might say for this story's sake maybe, was that there was only one bracing pole in that entire stretch of fence line. And it was exactly right where I needed it to be. A perfect godsend. I picked Mom's wild berries under the hot summer sun that day and thought about that hateful young bull, Charlie, for many and many a year. Still do sometimes. Deuteronomy 32:12. So the Lord alone did lead him, and there was no strange God with him. When I was maybe 9 or 10 years old or somewhere thereabouts, Mom once again asked me to pick her some berries for a cobbler. I remember back then never wearing a shirt when I went out picking, even though the chiggers were agitating and pitiful to a distraction most of the time, and would prickle and irritate me something fierce until I bathed later that night. Mostly in the summertime months, I was as tanned as the berries I picked, and the salty sweat slowly riveting down my shoulder blades and skinny little boy neck would channel down like miniature rivers into my blue jean trousers. Sometimes this sweat would temporarily blind me when it got into my eyes. Oh wait, there's a special note here. Not that my eyes were in my pants, mind you. Those are just two separate statements of fact about my propensity to sweat heavily out here under the Indiana hot summer sun. I like eating this stuff, I'd say to myself after picking a gallon or so, while picking off a frightening looking blue-gray tick that was slowly making his way up my leg, heading for God only knows where. But I sure do hate picking them. One day when I got home and Mom had just finished sorting the berries that I'd picked the day before, she said to me, "Donnie, I want you to take these extra berries I got left over to Mid." Mid was our next door neighbor. "Tell her I've got more than a plenty for our cobbler today, and she's sure welcome to them if she wants them. I know she likes them on her cereal of a morning." "Mom says to give you these, Mid," I said to our closest neighbor, standing on her back porch next to her pump well, while holding up a small wooden container of the deliciously delectable fruits. "Remember here, if you would, I picked these myself, but dared not even think or dream of eating just one of them, because Mom probably had them all tallied up and accounted for down to the last one. She says she knows you like them on your cereal every morning," I said, being very respectful like and repeating verbatim every word my mom had told me. "Why, you tell your ma thanks for me, Donnie, and here's something for your hard work and trouble picking them," Miss Mildred said, reaching down deep into her purse and pulling out a silver-collared treasure. It was a quarter she reached for and handed over to me. What? Had Mid just gone crazy here? She's giving me 25 cents for just a quart of berries. 25 cents for something that's totally free up on the hills. Shoot, all you gotta do is go pick them. 25 cents, why, that's like $1 million to an 8-year-old boy from Stony Lonesome Road back in '54. Maybe even a zillion. Immediately after I cautiously tucked the coin deep down inside my baggy trousers for safekeeping, I ran out of Mid's yard and over to my house and straight to the garage, where I collected up for myself there 2 white gallon buckets and headed for them thar hills, and they're free for the taking, plump and juicy purple-black treasures. After just a little while in a major patch that I'd been saving, and for what reason I couldn't possibly remember or guess after all these years, I had picked one full bucket clear up to the top and about a quarter to a half of another one, when the exhilaration and thrill of selling them took complete charge over me. I stopped picking, collected the full bucket from under a pawpaw tree, where I was keeping it out of the sun, split up the booty the best I could evenly into both buckets and anchored them tightly to my belt so they wouldn't spill out when I was running, and dashed home to clean them up and begin my new career as a bona fide professional blackberry picker. Now, there was this brand new life experience dwelling up inside of me. It was an entrepreneurial spirit, and it was a magnificently wonderful feeling for me, to say the least. I loved it. Quickly cramming 6 huge heaping quartfuls of freshly picked and tenderly cared for berries into my little red wagon, that was hard to say, I left my yard and raced as fast as I could down the gravel road across the creek in front of our house and headed straight for town. The first house I stopped at on Indiana Avenue bought 4 quarts of my delicious delights and paid me $1, a whole American dollar. I was definitely in business now. Then the lady of the house, her name was Mary, I remember, because I had a deep little boy crush on her. She called over from her porch to the lady who lived next door. That lady bought the remaining 2 quarts of berries I had and gave me a full 50 cents more. Now I had $1.50 in my worn out pockets from the day's pickings and 25 cents from the pickings the day before, the money Mid gave me, remember? For a grand total of $1.75 cash money, no checks. I'm stinking rich is what I am. Ah, sweet success. I could taste it, and it tasted good, just like blackberries. I had planned to go back up the hill the next day and pick some more, but first I had to spend some of this enormous booty that was burning a hole in my pocket like a red-hot poker, just begging to be spent. I took my now empty little red wagon home and exchanged it for my Western Flyer bike from out of the garage and pedaled it as hard as I could for the never-to-be-forgotten local grocery store called Baker's. Baker's Grocery Store. Mr. Baker ran a wonderfully delicious-smelling country-style store on the edge of town, directly across the street from the town's second-largest employer, the Cochran Chair Factory. There at the front door of the store, penny bubblegum smells welcomed you in as a special guest each and every single time, followed closely by the combined tantalizing aromas of freshly cut garlic bologna, pepper loaf, and huge yellow rounds of creamy Colby cheese somewhere there in the back next to the alley door. The bread there at Baker's was always the freshest around, and he and Mrs. Baker were always sweet and kind to us kids who rarely, if ever, had any money other than just a few pennies at a time to spend. The floor of the store was made up of well worn down brown wooden slats. I can still hear sometimes in my mind's eye the distant footsteps of the people who walked there. I remember equally as well too there at the front of the store the special high-pitched sounding squeal or squeak the 2 rusty screen doors made, the doors with the metal butternut bread signs that banged extremely hard in the door jamb whenever anyone entered or departed from there. My special aroma palace. There was a whopping 2-cent reward for every pop bottle we kids searched for and found discarded along both sides of Highway 50 and brought in, which was how the vast majority of us kids at Up Our Valley bought our candy and other treats with each day. Treats we just had to have or positively and simply would just die. Now that I had firmly established myself in a solid upward rising career of blackberry picking, 2 days experience in the cutthroat field of blackberry picking and sales should be enough to qualify me for that. I had to be wise and protect it. And oh, too soon I got the opportunity to do just that. Give me one of those candy bars you got there in your hand, Donnie, a greasy-haired local thug demanded of me as I left Mr. Baker's store, with 3 or 4 Mr. Goodbars clutched tightly in my berry-stained hands. Back in those days, some 60-odd years ago now, Mr. Goodbars were plumb chock full of peanuts, by the way. They were only 3 cents apiece, an amount that hardly made a dent in my $1.75 berry-picking bankroll. Make you a deal, I quickly posed to the bully without even thinking for a moment of the ramifications of the consequences of making such a dangerous move with him, and waiting now to get knocked off of my bike and mugged for at least one of my chocolate delights. What kind of deal? The thug asked to my great surprise and definite pleasure. I gathered my courage and answered him straight to his face across the opposite hanging parked bicycles there in the front of the store. I'll give you one of these candy bars I have here in my hand and a soda pop, I said, if you'll pick me a gallon of blackberries and bring them over to my house. I promise. Why would you do that? He snorted incredulously through his nose, sort of dumbfounded and stupefied by my crazy, almost unfathomable offer. Totally taken aback was he. He's thinking hard now, this bully is, and I know it. He's thinking I've gone and lost my little pea-picking mind for making such an outrageous offer as the one I just proposed, especially since blackberries are free for the taking to anyone who wants to brave the thorny bushes and other prickly things and snakes to go pick them. Then he says to me something I find extremely incredible to comprehend, and especially from him. What if I get you 2 gallons, Donnie? What will you give me then? then I'll get you 2 Mr. Goodbars and 2 soda pops, I replied, very evenly and businesslike, I thought, even though I know for a fact I was sweating ferociously through my shirt and underpants both at the same time just then, because I didn't want to get beaten up by this guy again. Then he says to me, the bully does, showing me both of his big meaty fists at the same time right under my nose, as if I hadn't seen those big ugly ham hocks before in person many times in the past. "You better not be lying, Donnie," he says threateningly. "I'll knock your head off your shoulders if you're lying to me, and you know I will." Now, I don't know why that particular threat worried me so much that time, but it did. It shouldn't have. Should it have? Try saying that 3 times fast. It shouldn't have, because this guy had knocked my head off my shoulders so many times before in the past, it was on the ground more than it was on my shoulders when we'd meet. Think about that. What difference would one more time make? But somehow that day it did. To be honest, there really wasn't that much animus between the 2 of us boys back then. Only just a general dislike of one another until we grew out of it and became very good friends, and even went on to join the service together on the buddy plan. "You do it," I say to the bully, backing my bike away from him, or more like shrinking away, to be honest. "You go pick him, Duty Bug, and I'll prove it to you." But I was only wasting my breath saying all that just now, I was, because I was only talking to his fast-moving, quickly fading in the distance backside, because good old Duty Bug was already halfway back to his home to fetch his berry-picking buckets, so he could head for the hills and earn his just reward. But why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he be doing that, though, moving off that fast that way? How could he possibly lose with this stupendously stunning deal the 2 of us had just struck up between us? The answer is he couldn't. One way or the other, Duty would win out. He'd either get the candy bars and the soda pops I promised, or he'd get the distinct satisfaction of beating the living tar out of me again, which he loved to do anyway in the first place, just for the sheer fun of it. It was a win-win situation for good old Duty Bug, it was. What I didn't know until much, much later that same afternoon was that the bug had stopped off at several of our mutual friends' houses on the way home and had enticed them, too, with my very attractive, not-to-be-ignored offer as well, telling them, each of them, that I would give what I would give for a gallon of freshly picked blackberries. About 3 hours later that afternoon, Duty and 3 of his closest neighborhood cronies showed up, stinking with sweat, on my front porch with, near about as I could figure anyway, 8 gallons of freshly picked blackberries in their cheap silver-colored metal buckets hanging heavily down from their belts. "I'll see you later, Mom," I shouted inside the house to my mom, who was already heavily into the daily routine of making our evening meal of cornbread and whatever something or other. "I gotta go out for a while," I say to her. "You better be back in time for supper, young man," she hollered, so well perfectly timed here, I thought, and as if I coached her all afternoon to say it just that way, but I didn't, I promise. It was all her. "And don't you be late, I mean it," she addended right along. "Your dad will be home any time now, and he'll need your help in the garage with the chickens before we eat." I ran off the porch and jumped onto my Western Flyer bike that was almost always leaning up against the old maple tree next to the house, and led that itchy pack of chigger, tick-infested, sweaty berry pickers straight down to Mr. Baker's store for their hard-earned rewards. "8 cold soda pops for these guys, Mr. Baker," I said to the proprietor when all 5 of us stinking, grossly sweating boys dropped our bikes out front and rushed pell-mell out of control headlong into his shop. I myself was only stinking, though, because I had rubbed up against each of them trying to get off of my porch onto my bike. Normally, and you can ask either of my sisters, my wonderful sisters, about this if you want to, I smelled like a beautiful rose all the time. Just ask Elaine and Diana Kay, they'll tell you. "And give me 8 Mr. Goodbars too, sir, if you don't mind," I added, saying. 2 for each of them. They deserve every bit of it and more. And I'm the one that's going to be paying for everything. I proudly announced this like a big shot or something. "And no credit either," I enjoined her with relish and pride. "Not this time, anyway. This here'll be a cash on the barrelhead today. Straight up hard cash money all the way." I said this whole little speech of mine while slowly fishing out of my right front pocket, where I always, when I was a little boy, kept all of my uptown valuables and other such truck, a whopping 88 cents, and plopped it down hard on the slick linoleum-covered countertop in between the small, round, red cans of chewing tobacco and the even slicker green and white packages of tasty, but totally fake, I'm sure, beef jerky. Soda pops were 8 cents each back then, and Mr. Goodbars, I keenly recall, were only 3 cents apiece, for a whopping grand total of 88 cents. Darn that inflation stuff. Whose dumb idea was that anyway? Now, I don't know if I'm making this part up here right now, but I think I recollect that Mr. Baker's eyes looked down at me just then with a different look that day than he'd ever given me before when I handed him over the money. I think it was a look of admiration, or at least a newfound respect for me that I saw shining brightly in his eyes. At least that's what I like to think it was after all these years. He was a wonderful man, Mr. Baker was. Want to go over to Butch's house now, Donnie, and play baseball? The greasy-haired tough guy asked me all friendly-like now that he's had his soda pop and candy fix for the day. We're all going when we finish up these candy bars and soda pops. Can't now, I answer hurriedly. But thanks for the invite, I say. Whew, that was close. I almost answered him too quickly here, which might have aroused the bug's suspicion about why I didn't want to go play, which he knew full well I always did. He might have been a bully most of the time, but old Duty Bug, he wasn't dumb, and I didn't need any competition in my new berry picking operation. Well, okay, don't go, see if I care, he says, looking at me a little cross now. Don't be going all spastic on me. I was just asking a question, wasn't I? Like I already said, Duty, thanks, but no thanks. You fellas go on ahead of me and have fun. You heard Mom's telling me to get home before dinner, or I'll catch what for from Dad. And I sure don't want that. You know what that looks like. I'll catch up with you guys sometime tomorrow down at Pete's or Bobby's or wherever the game is. Don't worry though, I'll be there. Sure will. I'll be there. 'Cause I'm always there. There was always a tomorrow up our beautiful little green valley to play baseball. Thank you, Lord, for that. Well, I sure hate to say it here, especially because it was such a lucrative idea that I had, but those old boys only fell for that scheme of mine that one time only. But then again, what did I care? Nothing, that's what. After cleaning up and sorting the berries they had picked and going out and selling them in the neighborhood locals all the way down Stony Lonesome Road, where we lived, and up on Indiana Avenue down into town, I ended up with a whopping clear profit of $9.25, and I never got nary a chigger, a tick, nor a thistle scratch. Now I'm a bazillionaire in the neighborhood, and there would be no looking back for me ever. Thank God for the wonderful wisdom of King Solomon, with a little bitty smidge of Huckleberry Finn thrown in for good measure. I hope y'all come back again for chapter 2 of my life story titled The Manure and Snake Hole Incidents. Thank you for listening.